Welcome to Live, all things sci-fi and fantasy. John's guest this week is Joanna Rasmussen, aka Joanna Ras Reads.
So everyone, welcome to All Things Sci-Fi and Fantasy. This is my weekly, TikTok live podcast. And tonight we have Joanna Rasmussen, known as Joanna Ras Reads. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you having me here.
Yeah, no problem. So I've got a list of questions, but this is more just kind of a conversation. So how long have you been doing book reviews?
I started Book Talk, my account on Book Talk probably a year and a half ago. I think it was November of 2023. So that's kind of when I started actually publicly reviewing, and then eventually started a Bookstagram account a little bit later. But yeah.
Yeah. So what made you decide to do book reviews?
So I was reading and then was kind of on Book Talk as a viewer, just scrolling, watching people's videos. Yeah. Always thought about trying to do something more publicly, but didn't really. But actually my friend Brittany, who's in the chat right now, she was so kind and sent me a book, which is called A Book Fairy. And she sent me a book from my Amazon wish list. And my first video was posting about receiving that book, and it just kind of snowballed and went from there. And I kept posting videos and talking about books.
That's awesome. So do you have a favorite genre? Yeah.
I do actually. Fantasy, as you can see behind me. I have a lot of fantasy books behind me.
Yeah.
So fantasy, romantasy, that's kind of my go-to genre. I also enjoy reading romance books, sci-fi books, of course. Dystopian. I recently got into reading thrillers, and that's been kind of fun to get into that. And then just general fiction, historical fiction. I could pretty much read everything. Yeah. But mostly fantasy is where I read the most. So. Okay.
So when did you start reading? When did you fall in love with reading? And
that's a really good question. So I actually did not enjoy reading at all when I was growing up as a child and through junior high and high school. I think it was feeling like I was being forced to read in school, not getting to really choose so much what I was reading, but being forced to read a certain book that was assigned to us. I was resistant against that. I didn't like it. It wasn't until I became an adult and, could choose what I wanted to read. I was got married pretty young, right out of high school, and I ended up being a stay-at-home mom for 2 years, and that's when I picked up my first series and kind of read a whole series in a book and enjoyed that. And then just kind of read a little bit here and there, and then it had my obsession during the Twilight phase when the Twilight books came out. And read those books, and it was just kind of casually reading here and there, being obsessed with one series when a big series came out, like Hunger Games or things like that. Really, it was just recently, during the pandemic, we were home more and all of that. I was kind of getting into Book Talk and just started ordering books and reading them. And I read the ACOTAR series, A Court of Thorns and Roses, and that kind of sparked this obsession in me for fantasy. And it's kind of just been crazy ever since. So, yeah.
That's good. So what's your general process for doing a book review? I mean, everyone's a little different. So how do you go about saying, and how do you pick a book first that you want to review besides someone like me harassing you every other day? Will you read my book? Will you read my book? Will you read my book?
Well, I'm glad you did. I love your book. I have
thanks. Besides people harassing you, how do you pick a book?
Yeah, a lot of times it's what's popular, what other people are talking about. They're giving their book reviews and making recommendations, so I'll give it a try. However, I have found so many amazing books by lesser known authors or indie authors who are just don't have their name out there, but their books are incredible. So I've tried to open up my eyes to not just doing the popular books and trying to find those like diamonds in the rough. And as far as my process goes for reviewing books, I've tried it different ways. I've tried like keeping notes in like my notes app as I'm reading to like, I want to remember to say that. I'm not usually successful in that. So it's generally at the end of the book, I like give some time to process and marinate. And then I really just kind of sit down and make bullet points of like different things I want to make sure I say about the book, or what I liked about it, what I didn't like. I always, in my reviews, want to like, it's hard to give a review and not spoil it for other people. So kind of making sure I'm giving the tropes for what's in the book, or giving those type of things. But I don't know if I really have like a really good process. It's just kind of whatever comes out of me when the time comes, I guess.
Nothing wrong with that. Yeah. So how do you focus on, well, not focus, but how do you deal with being critical but fair in a book review process, right?
Yeah, that's the hard part too. I think what I struggle with too is I love reading so much now that I love every book, even if there's flaws, or even if I didn't like the way something was done. But I think it's important when you're being critical to like, I don't ever want to criticize the author or say that it's like bad writing, or I don't know, like people just like different things. So when I'm criticizing, I try to make sure I'm not like putting anything down that someone else might like, because it's just because I didn't like something doesn't mean someone else won't like it. So I don't know. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of...
that's okay. So when you consider evaluating a book, how do you decide on a rating score? Or how do you decide, what you're going to give it? Is there some categories that are just, the book has to have these for me to really give it that? Or
so I actually,
one for me would be is it clean, right? Does it have the sentences all make sense? Is it no typos? Those kind of things. One of the things I look at when I'm an author, so I can't look at those things, right? So.
That's a good question. I actually just at the beginning of the year, like set myself some kind of guidelines and standards for like when I'm rating like my star ratings, on a scale of 1 to 5 stars. I used to totally just rate off vibes. Like, I loved it, it's 5 stars, or that was great, it's 4 stars. But I've put a little bit more guidelines for myself to try to be more consistent with how I rate. I don't really, unless it's like extremely like bad punctuation and grammar and like you can't understand the sentences, I usually don't put that against an author or against a book, because I still think you can enjoy it even if it's not, even if it's missing commas or whatever. But I do, in my everyday job, I do a lot of editing, so I do see all of those little mistakes. But as far as like what I've chosen for ratings, a 5-star is one of those books that I am like obsessed about and just keep thinking about throughout the day when I'm not reading it. If I'm like, reading it over the course of several days, a book I'm still thinking about days later after I finished reading it, like that's a 5-star book. 4 stars is I liked it, but I'm not obsessed with it. 3-star is like, I liked it. It was, it was okay. I generally don't give 2 or 1 stars because I would stop reading it if it got to that point. So, but a 2-star would be like, I don't like it. 1 star, it was horrible. So,
so what are some red flags that would drive you to a 1-star kind of rating where you go, I'm going to stop reading this? Because
that would be like a DNF. If I'm completely bored and not even interested in what's going on at all. Like, if I'll give it a good effort. I read through half or more of the book before I decide to DNF, which I don't DNF often. But it would have to be like, I'm bored out of my mind. I don't even know what's happening because I'm not even following it anymore. Like that would make me stop reading a book.
So how do you deal with authors when you have, or obviously sometimes the author knows you're going to review it and then you don't, or do you have any issues like that you see? What's your biggest challenge?
I haven't had any instances yet where I've like gotten a book from an author and agreed to read it and review it. I always read those all the way through and haven't had the point where I've DNF'd. So,
well, there you go. That's good.
Yeah, but if I were in that situation, I mean, especially if it's a like indie author that's trying to, start their career and make it, I would reach out to the author and let them know. I probably wouldn't leave a horrible review for a new author. So, if I'm being honest.
So what I typically do is I'll give it a decent review, but then I'll go back individually and give coaching points for me, because I want them to know, that, to get to that level, that next level, there's, the things I saw.
Yeah.
Sometimes they go, oh, that's great, thank you. Sometimes you don't know what you're talking about. It's like, oh, well, at least I made the effort, right? So,
yeah, I can see that going either way.
Yeah, it does. But it's how you coach it too, right? So,
right.
So, what was one of your more favorite reviews you've done in the last year? Not just this year, but let's say the last year and a half. That was one of your favorite reviews. Besides my book, I know mine was one of your favorite. Yeah, but besides
that's the top one, of course.
Yeah.
My favorite review.
I'm going to cut that out and use that.
Oh my gosh, I don't even know. I mean, I just recently read advanced reader of Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez.
Okay.
And I'm obsessed with her books. I love everything that she's written. So, I mean, I think I was just excited to do a review about that book. I haven't actually done a recorded review for that. It's just written on like Goodreads and that right now. I still need to make a video review, but I don't know if I can pinpoint a favorite one. I mean,
or one of your top ones. It doesn't have to be like the top one. It could be one of your more favorite ones you've done.
What's the book I've reviewed recently? Oh, a new book that's coming out. One of my recent reviews is Shades of Power. It's Jenny Grimes is the author, and that's another arc. Her book comes out in a few days on the 11th, I believe, and that book was so fun, and I had a good time reviewing it and talking about it, and
Okay.
Everyone go check out that review.
Yeah, exactly. So, what are some of your biggest challenges you face as a book reviewer?
Biggest challenges. That's a good question. Probably, I mean, there's two different sides of it. There's the like written reviews on Goodreads.
Yeah.
And then there's the making videos reviews. As far as like Goodreads, I want to make sure I'm like going into getting enough information in there that will help somebody decide if they want to read the book or not, but without spoiling the book, of course. But as far as like creating video reviews, I would say the hardest part is like trying to like get that attention grab right at the beginning, so people will stick around and listen to what I have to say about it. I don't know if I'm always successful in that, but video creation reviews is a whole different beast besides like just writing a review. So
it's interesting for me as an author. I think they're both really important, right? Because there's a ton of people on Goodreads, and it's really important in Amazon because not only do people look at reviews, but it also helps in the algorithm and where you get placed in Amazon, right?
Oh, okay.
And as far as, unfortunately, 70% of the book sales are in Amazon. So it's really important for authors, when they're asking for reviews, that they get that in Amazon, which is one of the reasons why I push back. Hey, could you add that to Amazon, right? Because you did a great one in Goodreads, and
Yeah, I think I did a review for you on Amazon too, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it helps if it's a verified purchase. That even notches it up a level for reviews. So, but that's interesting how you focus on different character qualities for each kind, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Because with a video, you need to be fast and concise and like, this is what I like, and these are the tropes, and here's why you should read it. Where you know, when you're writing out a review, you can be like more in depth and say, you know, more information. So it's just depends on the medium and what's going to work.
So do you get arcs? And if you do, does that affect how you do your review process?
Yeah, I do get arcs. I've different ways get them, whether it's an author reaching out to me, asking me to read their book, or I'll often reach out to a publisher and request a book, or go on NetGalley and request a book. But as far as the review process goes, I mean, I feel like it's pretty much the same. I mean, I did talk a little bit about like if I hated the book, I would reach out to the author and like talk to them before I wouldn't want to post a horrible review. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like it's this gray area of like wanting to make sure you're supporting the author, but also wanting to be honest with your reviews as well. So
I think, as an author, there's there's people we send for ARC reviews to kind of build up, but there's also beta readers, which are those people who are supposed to come back and say, hey, this didn't work. I like this. I didn't like that. To help give constructive criticism so you can go back and make sure when the ARC goes out that, it's the best it can be. And hopefully it's missing those kind of things that pull you back and go, oh, I didn't like that.
Right.
But a lot of authors don't go through that process. And so then they wonder why people don't like their book, or it sells, only to family and friends. It's, well, you have to go back and kind of look at your craft and where you're at, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I haven't had the chance to be a beta reader yet. I would love to do that someday. But yeah, I see what you mean. It's like completely different where beta readers are like the author's asking for that feedback and to, so yeah.
So I guess you don't care whether it's a self-published author or a published author, as long as you're getting a book, you like it.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I mentioned earlier, there's so many self-published indie authors out there that have such amazing stories and great books that just haven't made it out there yet. So I've been enjoying reading some of those. So
book TikTok and book talk reviewers and authors and readers is an unusual community to me, because it's usually never meshed together like that, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it's been really exciting to build friends.
Yeah.
So for me, it's been really exciting to build friends, develop friends and work with people and see other people coming on and growing as they're going. I remember when I asked Mike from Arkansas, can you help me get to 200 followers so I can actually do a live?
Right.
So, and he actually stepped up and actually, even though I only had like 50 people following, he said, yeah, I'll read your book, So,
that's great.
So how do you feel about reader engagement or TikTok engagement versus, doing Goodreads or anything else?
Like, how do I feel like engagement on TikTok? As far as like,
is that important for your doing book talks, or how do you handle that? I guess.
I mean, for me, the best part about book talk is the community of people. I've made so many friends here that I mean, you never think going online that you'd really like make these real relationships. But I mean, there's people I literally text now, and like, we've become actual friends, and I've met them here on Book Talk. So I think building that community is super important especially if you're a book reviewer or want to like make content, is having that community of people so you can support each other. And that's kind of important for sure.
So how do you handle feedback to your book reviews, especially if it's like negative? I
love it. I encourage it. Like, tell me if you think I'm wrong. Because I know everyone has a different perspective and everyone likes different things. And I think that's what's so great about the book community is, I recognize that if I don't like a book, that doesn't mean it's bad. Someone else might absolutely love it. We just like different things. So I love hearing what other people have to say about it if they think I'm
Yeah.
wrong. For example, I told you was obsessed with the A Court of Thorns and Roses book by Sarah Maas. There's been people who have put in my comments like, that book was trash, I hated it. So it's like not necessarily the nicest thing, but I do like hearing like other people's perspectives, because then I'll ask back like, why? What did you not like about it? And then get more context. So I'm open to people responding negatively to my stuff.
Good. Yeah. It's for an author, you're never going to please everybody, right? You're always going to have negative reviews and positive reviews. And I remember the first time we got a 2 for Future's Dark Past. My wife, who's my writing partner, got all Mama Bear about it, right?
Oh, I can understand that.
Yeah. And so I went and I pulled several authors and said, look at their reviews and look at all those 1s and 2s. They got all, it's a small percentage, but they're getting them, right? So you can't really worry about that. You're never going to please everybody. So
that's so true.
I guess the same with book reviews, right? That you can find people who don't. Yeah, I had one person say the first chapter of Future's Dark Past was as dumb as the day is long. I remember that. I said,
that's just mean.
I know. I said, well, you must live in Alaska and it must be winter. The day's really
shortest day.
So do you think book reviews influence a book's success?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I really do. Especially now with like a platform like TikTok. I mean, we can see how things just like spiral and, something becomes so popular. One, that author that comes to mind is Alex Astor with her book Lightlark.
Yeah.
She started out as a book talk creator and was making videos and was like, I have this idea for a book. Would you guys read it? And it just kind of went from there. And I truly think it was TikTok that made her so successful and such a huge author now. So I think especially, not just her videos, but people then posting about it, and social media makes a huge difference on whether something can be successful or not. Not that it's the only way, but
it helps.
It makes a difference.
It definitely does. So have you noticed any trends or shifts in the type of books being published right now? Do you track reviewed recently? Have you seen differences in what's coming out?
I can say as far as like, besides genres, I mean, with genres, I feel like I don't know if it's just me because I'm loving it, but I'm seeing a lot of fantasy and a switch towards like fae and dragons and all of that in fantasy books. Also, I think as far as like physically how the books look, huge trend is sprayed edges, as you can like see behind me. I have a lot of that. And so many books are coming out now as their first print with those sprayed edges, instead of it being like a special thing that happens later after a book becomes popular. So I'm seeing that kind of shift happening. But yeah, I mean, it just in general, the obsession with reading, like the increase in amount of readers in the past few years. And I don't know if it's like started with the pandemic or if it's from TikTok or what it is, but it seems like there's so many more people reading than there used to be 5 years ago even.
So paper or electronic?
Both. I have my Kindle right here.
Yeah. Okay.
So usually every night I have this. I'm reading it in bed before I go to sleep. But I am also, as you can see, I'm a book collector. I always say I have 2 hobbies. I read books and I collect them. Yeah. So even if I'm reading it on my Kindle, I'll often have my book trophy too. So for example, your book, I read part of it on here and I ended up downloading the ebook so I can read it at night too. So my publisher is merging with another company, and one of the things they're going to do are ebooks that are combined with audiobooks. So you can read a little bit, and if you want to listen, you can listen a little bit, and then if you want to read a little bit, it's kind of nice. I definitely do the audiobooks too, and I'll do immersive reading where I listen and read at the same time. Yeah. That's always nice too.
So what makes a good audiobook for you?
The narrator is very important.
Yeah.
If different. Sometimes there's a narrator where you just like their voice just grates on my nerves, so I have to stop listening to it. But that doesn't happen too often. But
Yeah.
a
Hopefully
narrator,
they're chosen wisely, right?
Yeah. A narrator can definitely like make or break an audiobook for sure. But yeah, and I think as long as a narrator like is expressive, and I love when there's like multiple narrators, a duet, or different points of view with different narrators. That's always great. So yeah.
Claude, I interviewed Claude, who's a book reviewer, and he listens to books at like 4 times the speed.
Yeah.
So do you do that? Do you speed up?
I'm not quite there. My norm is usually it's at 1.5 speed. I work my way up there. Yeah. But if I try to listen to it at like the normal speed, it sounds like they're talking in slow motion to me. So
especially because you're reading past it, right? If you're immersing yourself.
Yeah. But so usually I have it about 1.5. Now Taylor, who's in the comments here, she's one of those like has it at 2.5 or 3 for sure.
Yeah. So when you're doing your posts, your book, do you speed them up or do you leave them?
What's the question?
Do you speed up your posts that you do when you post them? Like I do mine at 1.1 to 1.2.
Oh, like after I record it, do I?
Yeah.
I actually don't. I've learned to talk faster and also edit out. I edit out my breaths. I don't know if anyone ever noticed that. When I go to take a breath, I literally edit out that like 0.2 of a second.
Yeah.
And that's all about like keeping people's attention. That's like a trick I saw someone else say to do. If anyone goes back to my early on videos, I'm definitely talking a lot slower and like, I'm taking pauses for breaths and all of that. But that's just a little like editing tricks I've learned over time is to talk fast and edit out.
See, I'm from Texas. We just don't talk fast.
Right.
So it's like, in CapCut, I can speed this puppy up. Great.
Right. That works.
Yeah. So
CapCut's a great editing tool. That's what I use too. So.
Is that what you use? Yeah. I got some other questions here. For you, what's more important in a book, the storytelling or the writing style?
Ooh, I think both are important. I mean, I wanted to say like the story itself, but the writing style has a huge effect on like whether you're enjoying the book or not. I don't know. That's a really tough question. I'm going to say I think the writing style is pretty important just because that can be something that makes me like if I'm not jiving with it, I get bored. So I would say that.
I'm reading the Old Man War series by John Scalzi, and his voice in it is just pulls. I think it's a really good voice, and it just sucks you into the story, and you're just living it with him.
Yeah,
that's really important. But if the story gets boring, doesn't matter how good your writing style is.
See, that's true.
You're just going to go. I don't like. There's been a couple shows out there where it's like, okay, there's not one character in this story I like.
Yeah, it's like Felissa says in the comments, they go hand in hand. Like, they kind of both have to work at the same time in order for it to be a good story.
Yeah, I'm not seeing comments, so
you're not?
No, I'm not. It's not that I'm ignoring people, but the way this is set up, I'm not seeing them, so I don't know what it is. But so if somebody's saying something, go ahead, feel free to interrupt me and say, hey, I'm going to answer this, and we'll go from there. So I was like, you say, oh, wait, there's comments? I'm like, what the heck are those?
Oh, yeah, people are commenting away.
Are they? Okay. Yeah. Well, I feel bad for that I haven't been answering any of those or introducing them or saying hi to people that are on. So
that's all right. I'll try to bring some up if I see something.
So when you read a popular book that's got a lot of hype, does that impact how influence your reviews at all? Have you ever had one where you go, "That's a popular book, but I don't know why"?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it necessarily makes my reviews different. I mean, it definitely affects whether or not, if everyone's talking about a book and it's popular, I'm probably going to end up getting it because I want to read it too. But as far as the review goes, I don't think so. I mean, I try to be honest in how I feel. And, there have been books that have been super popular that I haven't loved, but I just try to write what I do like about it. I always try to, even if I don't absolutely love a book, I still want to say what I did like about it, and then some things that I wished were different. Or
I think I said in my intro, one of my leading up commercials, like, you were one of the most positive, upbeat people I've met on here. So it's nice to have those kind of people here instead of everybody just being negative. And, so
I appreciate that so much. And that's the thing is, even if I have something not great to say about a book, I always want to say that positive too. Because again, somebody else might like it. They might be able to overlook the thing I didn't like and be excited about the thing, that I loved. So,
I'm positive this book stinks. No. So for aspiring book reviewers, what would be some advice you would give someone who wants to start out doing book reviews? 'Cause I see a lot of those on here too. They have 20 people. They're just starting out. So what advice would you give to them?
And specifically video book reviews, doing video content, or
let's do both. Let's start with video and come back to
that. Okay, so with video reviews, I mean, the main thing is building that community of people, building those, people that you interact with. Be yourself. Don't try to be someone you're not. And, just keep posting. Especially with TikTok, you literally have to pretty much post every day to stay in the algorithm and all of that, or more. I post once a day and that's it. But it's just, being consistent, be yourself, make sure you're building that community and interacting with other people, because then they're going to support you and interact with you. And as far as the reviews themselves, give your honest opinion and, make sure to not just bash a book, but say why you don't, what specifically you don't like about it and what you do like about it. And, maybe if you didn't like it, but if you are this type of reader, you might like it. It's just making sure you're spinning things and not spinning things, but telling the whole story. Just, I didn't like it because of this, but you might like it for this reason. I think that's, that kind of helps people who are watching the reviews really get an understanding of what the book's about, and not just, oh, this person hated the book,
So writing a review, what tips would you give someone?
Some of the same, as far as what you like about it, what you would change or didn't like about it, making sure you're bringing up the different tropes, and kind of being more thorough in your writing, as far as, instead of just quick saying things really quick in a video. If you want other people to really benefit from your review, make sure you're putting content in there that you would want to know about the book, and that would be beneficial for other people. So,
one of the key things I think I mentioned earlier for authors is to get reviews on Amazon and Goodreads. A lot of times you'll ask people, say, "Hey, will you give me a review?" And they won't do it because they don't know how, right? So I reach back out to them and say, "Hey, did you like my book?" "Yeah, I loved it." "What did you like about it?" And then I say, "What character?" And then I just start asking questions and follow up and say, "Well, can we take that and build that into a review?" Right? Because now you've said what you liked and how you felt about it, and what character was important, and the setting.
That makes me wonder. I'm wanting to know from you what you think makes a good review, and what what like.
Well, 5-star for me. So, well, there's two kinds of reviews. I mean, there's the early on, like the beta reviewers, where you really want them to be super critical and nitpicky, right?
Yeah. But those aren't public reviews, right? That's
those aren't public. No, that's just feedback. Like I can send you book 3, right, and say, hey, as a beta reader, what do you think? And I expect people. The problem is when you send it to friends and family,
they're not going to tear it apart.
They're not going to tear it apart. So you really need to find people that will tear it apart and say, hey, I like this, I didn't like that. And, you know, it's funny because people who were like that with book 1 and book 2, they weren't quite as much. And now in book 3, they're like, not at all. So I love this. Like,
really?
You've gone to the dark side.
So you were already at the beta stage for book 3?
I'm about, yeah. I did an alpha stage, and now we're wrapping up, and we're going to do another beta stage in April.
Okay.
So if you want to be on, I'll add you to the list.
Maybe. I've never done beta reading, but
yeah. Well, it's just more like you said. You know, right now because you're doing it in front of people. You have to really couch what you say, right? And when you're a beta reader, you don't have to worry about that because, you know, I have my big boy pants on and, you know, you tell me, as long as you're not saying, John, you're stupid, right?
Right, but I feel like this didn't make sense to me.
Yeah. That plot point, I don't understand. How did you get there, right? So things like that. It's, you know, I have a writing community where we meet once a week and go through chapters and you know, you really have to have your big boy pants on because
I bet other authors and writers.
Yeah,
I'm sure they're happy to tear it apart.
I was in a conference where this lady was couples who write together, and the lady said, "Well, I've learned to sandwich it." And I said, "What's sandwich it?" And she goes, "Well, I start with nice stuff, and then I do the hard stuff, and then I end with nice stuff." And when you're in a writing community with other authors, they don't sandwich anything. They just go, "This is not what I like." They don't ever say, "Oh, I really like that." Right?
Right. But I'm sure that's so beneficial to have people just be blunt and honest. You know.
Yeah.
As long as you have to be accepting to it, but
yeah. Well, at the end of the day, it's still your book, and you have to go, "Okay, I like that. I didn't like that." So, but if you get 5 or 6 people saying the same thing, then you kind of go. You know, if you got an outlier and everybody else loved it, then you go, I think I'll go with what everybody loved.
Right.
You know, so
there's always going to be those outliers.
Yeah.
But as far as like a written review goes,
yeah,
that would be public, that, you know, someone like me might write a review for. What are you hoping to see in a review? Like as far as that you would want shared with other people, like different things, different parts about the book, or
I like for them to be able to give an overall feel for the book without spoiling the end, right?
Yes.
If they want to spoil the beginning, that's okay, because that kind of attracts people in and go, oh, that kind of... and then reviews that just say, oh, that was a great book, I loved it. Well, that's okay for the algorithm, but for people reading, that doesn't give anyone a flavor for what the book's about, right? So, you know, just a couple sentences about what they really liked about it, whether it was the fast pacing or the character development or, you know, something like that, then that helps other readers go, oh, that I resonate with that, because that's what you want book reviews to be about, is resonating, right, with other readers. And unless it's a bad one, then you just kind of, you say, that wasn't helpful on Amazon. You call your friend and say, Mark, that's not helpful. See, there's tricks and trades, right? You know, so no, that's kind of what you want. And then, you know, it's hopefully they're reaching out to friends and asking them to, you know, say, hey, I checked this book out, you should check it out, because word of mouth is so important, right? So, because I don't have a big budget.
Yeah, right? Word of mouth is huge for sure.
So you really want people to like your book and say, hey, I read this, and spread the word, right? So that's where I'm at.
All right.
So what are some of your favorite fantasy series that you've read that really got you into, God, I really love fantasy?
Yeah. The first like series that, well, I mean, there's I mentioned Twilight earlier. That's
Yeah.
more like kind of paranormal romance, I guess, it
Yeah.
would fall under. But it's really A Court of Thorns and Roses is the one that like completely ignited something in me
Yeah.
and made me obsessed with like reading fantasy and reading in general. But my absolute favorite series is Throne of Glass, which is also by Sarah J. Maas. And then
Was that her first series?
her first series was ACOTAR.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And then Throne of Glass is her second series, and then she has Crescent City as well.
Yeah.
I love that Throne of Glass is a finished series; it's complete, so that's nice. But some other authors and series I really like: the Crowns of Nyaxia series by Carissa Broadbent. I've really enjoyed reading that. An author I recently discovered is Stacey McEwen, and I read her Glacian trilogy, Ledge, Chasm, and Valley. Really loved that a lot. Rachel Gillig, and her Shepherd King duology, which is One Dark World, Two Twisted Crowns. I've enjoyed that. So many. I mean,
So have you read things like Lord of the Rings?
I actually haven't read Lord of the Rings yet.
Okay.
I watched the movies and love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've watched a lot of fantasy over the years when I wasn't reading. Also have watched a ton of sci-fi. I grew up watching Star Trek Next Generation. Like that was something my brother and I used to watch together. And I think that was the start of my love of sci-fi was that show. And then, so many other movies and things like that I watched. So
when you see a movie and there's a book out there and you read the book and then you compare the two, or do you?
So when I see that there's a movie that's about to come out that has been a book, I always want to read the book first before I watch the movie. For some reason, if I watch the movie first or a show, I end up not wanting to read the book because I kind of already know the story, which doesn't make a lot of sense because the other way is the same. But I like to read the book first and then watch the movie so I can compare and see like if the visual that, the people creating the movie and producers have made what does it compare to what I envisioned in my head?
Yeah.
And of course the books are always better. Like there's so much more information, so much more detail. You can get in the character's head better. But yeah, I do like reading and then watching and kind of comparing the two.
So I actually like the Lord of the Rings movies better than the books.
Do you?
Yeah, I love the books, but it's just so ponderous. You have to just wade through and wade. Because back when he was writing, there was nothing wrong with a 20-sentence paragraph, and half the sentences are over 20 words long. It's just like, oh man,
Yeah, I've heard that. There's a lot more like almost not too much detail, but it like goes on longer than
the same with Dune, right? If you go back and really read Dune, you go, "Ooh, this plods," but when you watch the movies, they don't plot at all,
right?
So, it's kind of like your reviews versus critiques, but so I kind of categorize them. They're different. I read for the and sometimes I just stew in a paragraph. I'll go back and read it 2 or 3 times to really see what they're doing and things like that. Mm-hmm. And I've really noticed a change in how authors write today versus even 15 years ago, right?
Sure.
Because of social media and how quick people click through things, you really have to change your writing style. Like right now, the first couple of books I wrote were more in the style of in the 90s and where they had big paragraphs and a lot of description, and they're called info dumps, right?
Right.
Right. And
but we all
nothing
have
was wrong.
Attention span, so
Yeah. So now I write short chapters. I write paragraphs that never have more than 5 or 6 sentences, and I never have a sentence. Very few sentences over 20 words, And so I've just really pushed to make sure that it clicks.
I think that's really smart because I love short chapters. I almost get frustrated when a chapter just keeps going and going and going.
Yeah.
So and like keeping, paragraphs and sentences shorter, I think honestly really does help this game for sure. We all have short attention spans.
Yeah. The problem with writing short chapters for an author is you have to have something at the very end that hooks them to make them want to read on to the next chapter, right?
Yeah.
And so I work really hard at that. So
I saw something funny in a book I read recently. And in this book, the narration or the narrator telling the story would interject their own like comments and thoughts.
Yeah.
And at one point, a chapter ended and then the next chapter started and it said like chapter 26 and a half. And it said, because the last chapter was getting too long, we decided to break this chapter in half to keep the chapter short.
I have a 20-page chapter that Leanne and I are going through. Where should we break this up? Because that's too long, right?
Yeah.
So, and now we're looking at breaking up the 3 chapters because it's too long. So,
we have Rachel in the comments. She loves long chapters. She says,
"Oh, does she?
Long chapters are her thing."
And then she would love Lord of the Rings. So.
Yeah.
So, I did this last time with Abigail. Oh, and I stole it from Claude. He said, so if you had to do a Mount Rushmore of authors, your top 4 authors, who would you put in your Mount Rushmore? And it could be any genre that you want, right?
Okay. Let me think here. I mean, Sarah J. Maas.
Okay.
Of course. Abby Jimenez. Who else? I mean, J.L. Yarrow, of course.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Joanna Illingworth, she's an independent author that I have loved every book she's written.
Okay.
So I would say her. Is there anyone else? I gotta look around and see. I don't know, maybe Rachel Gillig. I've really loved her books. It's hard to narrow it down.
I get that.
Carissa Broadbent's great too. So.
Yeah. So, speaking of fantasy series, have you ever read David Eddings' Belgarian series?
No.
Okay. He was back in the 90s. Yeah. All 3 of my kids, I read it to all 3 of my kids, and both my daughters made me, like 2 years later, reread it to them. And I was like, you're kind of old for me to be reading to, but okay. so I would reread it to them. It's a great fantasy series.
Okay, you said it was David Belgetti?
No, David Eddings.
Eddings.
Eddings is the Belgarian series. Pawn of Prophecy is the first book. Mine's I'd pull it out, but it's kind of falling apart now.
It's well loved.
Yeah, it was. So I actually started reading fantasy. My first fantasy series I read was Conan the Barbarian.
Really?
Yeah, by Robert E. Howard. And you think, it's just a bunch of hacking and killing and everything, but it's like when you read some of his sentences, the visualization that he had and the way he built a world, it's kind of like Brandon Sanderson does, right? You just all of a sudden you're absorbed into it and you're like, oh my gosh, right? So that's how I got into and in college, because I was living in a garage apartment, really poor. That all I had were books. So hey, I think I could do this. So I started writing.
Really? So is that what inspired you to write?
Yeah, actually, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I wrote 2 novels before the Future's Dark Past. So those are my practice novels.
I was going to say, are they published?
No. Well, okay. I published this one, The Recombinant Theory, but after you start reading it now, you kind of go, I need some work. And I was self-published, and when I got with my publishers, like, I need to take that one down.
Really?
So someday, it's not, because it doesn't match the same level of writing I'm at now. So someday I want to go back and edit it and rework it, because it's a good story. I was just going to ask you that.
If you continue and, when you get super famous, will you release that book?
Yeah, I will. Absolutely. I'm going to do that. And my first book was called From a Far Colony. It was about 2 couples taken off of Earth and put on a planet that was really a zoo of all these colonies of aliens. Okay. And then the 2 women get stolen from them, so they have to journey through these colonies to get their wives back, and then figure out a way to get back to Earth.
That sounds really interesting.
It was, and that's one I want to go back and do too. But I've got this one. I'm finishing this one, and then I have another series coming up called The Five Known Worlds, which is a more of the dark forest kind of theory, where you really shouldn't be out there exploring too far because careful what you ask for, right?
Yeah, well, and that'll be sci-fi again.
Yeah. And it won't be time travel; it'll be more linear, which I think will be more mainstream. Time travel's hard for a lot of people to read, so
it can be. There's time travel, even like movies or anything like that where it gets really confusing, and you're like, wait, what's going on in this timeline? But I feel like your book did it really well. I was never confused with like what was going on when, and I honestly think you did it really great.
Oh, thanks. I did see, I saw one mainstream movie that did very similar was Oppenheimer.
Oh, I haven't watched that one yet.
So it starts in the future, jumps back to the past. It kind of goes like this all the way to the middle and then jumps back to the very end. Okay. It's really interesting the way they have that set up. It's a really good movie. Okay,
I'm going to have to watch that.
Yeah, so.
What made you want to write a time travel sci-fi? Is there something that inspired it, or?
Yes. There was an old TV show called Time Tunnel.
Okay.
And it was in the 60s, late 60s, and it had this spinning thing that kind of went back into a spiral. And two guys went back. One guy went back because some crazy guy got in. And so the whole premise is they're going back to chase this guy, try and get him back. And they go through all these historical time periods. And I was like, well, that was its only purpose. What if we had a bigger purpose? Like, you're in the future and the world's going to be destroyed. What would you do to fix it, right? If you knew it was coming, hindsight's 2020. If we knew, what would we continue going down the path we're going down as a planet right now versus knowing, because a lot of people, well, you don't know that global warming is going to kill the planet. You don't know that, Russia's going to wind up creating World War III. But if you did know, what would you do to change and stop? So that's kind of how, because I love the old science fiction people that really push to create a message of not just warning, but what it could be, right? Star Trek's a great example of that, right? They had a lot of this is how it could be, but they also had a lot of messages like, if we keep going this way, this is what's going to happen, right?
Right.
So I wanted to create something that had a good message, but also had a really good story. And the time travel just kind of lent itself to that for me.
Okay.
And then, of course, I started out with Hunter being the main character, and then, 3/4 of the way through, my wife halfway through, Leanne kept telling me, "You realize Kristen's the main character."
Yeah, and I love her. She's my favorite character. So
yeah. It's like, no, she's not. We got to the very end, and then we turned it into the publisher, and the publisher's like, "Well, I love the book, but it needs more character development at the beginning, and it needs a Death Star ending at the end." And so all of a sudden, I'm writing chapters at the beginning about Kristen. I was like, okay, Kristen's the main character. Yeah. And then I put a Death Star ending. My wife's like, "What's a Death Star ending?" That's a Star Trek reference. So she goes, "How are you going to do that?" I said, "Well," so.
Yeah, it was definitely an ending that makes me want to read the next one. I'm really excited to
yeah. And unfortunately, we've two things have happened with the publisher. He's merged with another company, which has really slowed the process down. But it's a good thing because there's going to be a lot more money for advertising and things like that, right? So we're excited about that. But the second piece was because they're merging, things slow down, and they are actually, you talked about those books having all the sprayed edges and everything. Well, 90% of those come from India.
Oh, really?
Yeah. India is outpacing our American printing companies because they're so much, less expensive and they have high quality and they don't have the supply chain issues, right? But now they do because I won't say the president's name, but there's a lot of problems with getting stuff here. So we're just waiting for that to happen. So we're looking at probably being released late April now.
Okay.
So
But the digital version.
the digital's out, yeah. The digital's out. So,
Yeah.
and the audiobook's being delayed because they're going to do that whole process I was telling you about earlier, where they merge them kind of together. So that'll follow up. But we're getting some good responses with the digital, so that's good.
Yeah. And so you said merging it together, so it'll be available for people to get the ebook and audiobook together as a bundle?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's I can't say much more than that. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Something similar to that.
Yeah. Something similar to that. I'm under NDA, so I'm not allowed to say a whole much more than that.
Well, that's
So,
exciting. I can't wait to find out more about that later.
Yeah. So I can tell everyone but then I have to go hunt them down. I can't chase everyone down. So we're getting close to the end of our time. Do you have any questions for me?
I don't think so. I mean, I've tried to ask them along the way, anything that popped up.
Yeah.
I don't know. Does anyone in the comments have questions that I can read?
Or for both of us, if they have a question, yeah. We still got like over 10 people on, so I'm going to have to figure out how to get questions and see the...
Yeah, that's weird that it's not showing.
Yeah.
No questions are
No?
unless the comments are stuck. Sometimes that happens.
Well, I don't want to drag it on because then people start clicking off, right? No, we go,
Rachel's asking what inspired you to write. I think you talked a little bit about the Conan the Barbarian book.
Yeah, Robert E. Howard inspired me, and I wrote for a short story, and I was in English class, and my professor said, "This is really good. Do you like to write?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, I have a writers group when we meet. You'd be more than welcome." And that's kind of how I got into it. It's called the Creation Factory's Writers Workshop.
And that was in college, or?
I was in college, yeah.
Okay,
so I joined that guy, and I started with a group of people, and I just all of a sudden I wrote from a far colony. The problem I figured out is I don't write small. It's really hard to write short stories for me. So my publisher wanted me to write a novelette between book 1 and 2, so to keep people engaged. And I sent it to him. He goes, "You realize this is a novella?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Really? It's a book. It's not even a novella. You have to finish it." I'm like, and so that wound up being the first part of the next series. So
okay. Someone's asking the question, what's your favorite genre to read?
Oh, I cut my teeth on fantasy, right?
Yeah.
And then I started delving into science fiction with Heinlein and Asimov and those guys, because some of those books were really good. So at this point, I go both ways, right? Although lately I've been reading Romantasy, the last 3 books. Before the Old Man were Romantasy. I started with D.D. Moore's Glowing Hearts, and she won my Kindle contest, right? I had a Kindle contest. Here's all the books in my Kindle. Who should I read? And her fans came out of the woodwork.
Really?
Yeah, I was like,
that's great.
Gosh. Okay,
and what do you think of
Romantasy?
What do you think of Romantasy compared to just straight up fantasy? Well, I say fantasy, and most of the times I mean Romantasy when I'm saying but
so I read hers, and it's a really good book, but then I read so I had Abigail Owen on, so I read The Rogue King, and it got to this one part. I was like, "Oh, that's blistering my ears and making me blush."
Yeah, there's definitely some books where you're like, "Oh."
I was like, "Whoa!" And then there were several parts, and then the next book I said, "So okay, I've read that. Now I've got The Fourth Wing." So I read The Fourth Wing, and there were a couple parts in there that made me blush, but. You know, that the fantasy piece is really strong. Yeah. And I'm like, do they really need that other stuff? But then there's a lot of people who just love that, right?
Yeah. So I think it helps for some audiences, for sure.
Yeah. And there's science fiction books like that, too. I picked up a science fiction book, and I was reading it, and I was like, "Oh, that's alien sex. Yikes."
Oh, yes. There's Ice Planet Barbarians, for sure.
Yeah. It's like, whoa, I did not see that coming.
Do you think you'll continue the Fourth Wing series, the Empyrean series?
Oh, yeah. What the heck's going on here? Oh, it doesn't think I'm playing. Okay.
Oh, the puzzle piece.
Yeah, I had to do the puzzle piece. Yeah. I'm going to read. I'm jumping back into science fiction, and I also have Sound Effect of Infinity and The Distributor, which are two of the Story Plant authors with me. I've promised to read their books. I read Sound Effects. I'm most of the way through it, and I'm starting The Distributor. And then once I'm through with those, I'll probably flip flop between the next one's the. I can't remember the name of the next one for Rebecca Yarros, but I'll read that one. I'll flip back between that and The Old Man War.
Okay.
So I find if I just stay in one genre, I kind of get stuck, and then so I flip back and forth.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
how do you balance your time between reading and writing? Like, do you have
good question.
a set like schedule where you write so much time per day and then you're off and do your reading or whatever else you want to do?
I still have a day job.
Okay.
So on Saturday and Sunday mornings, I do my creative writing. And so all week long, the characters kind of play in my brain, building whatever I'm going to write. And then I also do my editing during the week after either early in the morning. Sometimes I wake up early, and then sometimes after work, I'll edit for a half hour to an hour. And then sometimes if I'm falling behind in the afternoons on Saturday or Sunday, I'll do a 2 or 3 hour block of editing too. And then I take long walks with my wife to discuss stuff, in the books.
I love that you guys are you partner on the books.
Yeah. That's been a fun experience, and we've both kind of grown into it. And wasn't always that way. I was usually just writing, and she would be devil's advocate, and then she said, "Well, are you any good at this?" And I, took Future Stark Pass and entered several contests and won. And she goes, "Oh, you are good." So she started helping editing and just started. And then one day she goes, "This scene is just wrong." I said, "Why don't you just rewrite that?" And so she did, and then we've been off to the races ever since.
So how does it work? Do you usually do the first draft of writing and then she'll go back and edit and rewrite?
Yeah. I lay the first track down, and then she'll add tracks to it.
Okay.
Yeah. So
interesting.
Yeah.
I'm trying to picture trying to do a project like that with my husband, and I can imagine the arguments we would get into. So
well, we do cuss and discuss. So
nice.
So there's
you gotta have that passionate conversation there to I'm sure make some progress. So
so we've worked hard at separating that from our personal lives. So we do that. And sometimes it'll carry over, but not too often. And so, and most of the time we're on the same page anyway, so it's not too bad. So
that's good.
So,
all right, I'm trying to see if there's any other questions in the comments, but I think I don't see anything new that we haven't already discussed. So.
Okay. Well, hey, thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed getting to know you a little more.
Thank you.
See what you like, and I think some of your followers probably haven't heard some of that and how you do things, and so I think it was really interesting.
Yeah, I so much appreciate you inviting me to be on here today.
I like to have authors and book reviewers because you get a different view, right?
Yeah, for sure, a different perspective.
I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and to all my friends that are on here, read this book. It was really good.
I paid her money to say that. No, I didn't. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, have a great the rest of your evening, and thank you so much. What area of the country do you live in?
I'm in Washington State, so I'm on the west coast.
So it's still a little early for you. So.
Yeah, not too bad. Gonna go have some.
Not too bad. Okay, good. All right. Well, thanks so much.
Have a good night.
All right. Yeah, you too. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.